Welcome to Taiwan Report News Brief, news analysis and context from Taichung, Taiwan. I'm Donovan Smith. All right, up today on the program, an NPP city councilor lodges a criminal complaint over online harassment. One way or another, health insurance premiums will rise. Local politicians' popularity is shifting, and I'll nerd out on that. Government mulls building 3 new reservoirs in the face of looming water shortages. Frank Hsieh comes out against radioactive food. Steps are being taken to beef up conscription and reserves. More positive and potentially significant signs coming out of the U.S. But up first, headlines. The Central Epidemic Command Center, Taiwan, said that Taiwan will not procure coronavirus vaccines from China over safety and regulatory concerns. Health Minister Chen Shizhong denied the decision was ideological. The Taipei High Court has rejected a request by CTI TV for an injunction to prevent the shutdown of its pro-China CTI News channel when its 6-year broadcast license expires on December 11th. The government has unveiled plans to create a quantum technology hub in Tainan under the auspices of Academia Sinica and the Technology and Economics Ministries. The government plans to invest 8 billion NT into quantum technology over the next 5 years. Speaking in the legislature, the Air Force Chief of Staff confirmed that Taiwan is planning to buy more Patriot missiles, but didn't say how many. But Apple Daily cited sources reported 300. At the same hearing, the Vice Defense Minister said Taiwan has 2 defense procurement deals with the United States in the pipeline for 2021, worth approximately $8 billion US, but didn't specify what the budget was for. Media reports have speculated that they could be M109A6 Paladin self-prepared howitzer and smart mines. Taiwanese are to be excluded from participating in all UNESCO-affiliated events. The International Center for Theoretical Physics has confirmed. The confirmation came after Taiwanese researchers had their applications to join a conference last month rejected. New Power Party Keelung City Councilor Chen Wei-zhong has filed a police report and a criminal complaint alleging online harassment on Facebook. After reposting an article about the budget for a city exposition on Facebook, a commentator wrote that she was, quote, unconstructive, lazy, eye candy, and a fucking gay city councilor who, quote, gains from corruption. Cyberbullying often occurs during the election season, she said, adding that she was used to it. However, this time she filed a complaint because she does not want to see the quality of public discourse devolve into insults about a person's age, gender, or sexual orientation. She added, for far too long, young female politicians have often been looked down upon as incapable or just a pretty face. Now, Taiwan's laws on this are pretty strict, even in cases where the insults are pretty mild, so she'll likely win this one. However, there have been cases where people intentionally bait people into insulting them online so they can take them to court. The governing committee of Taiwan's National Health Insurance Program has submitted 2 proposals to the Ministry of Health and Welfare to raise premiums from the current 4.69% to 4.97%, or 5.47 to 5.52% at the start of next year. According to the National Health Insurance Committee, increasing premiums is necessary to address the program's rising deficits, without which it is projected to suffer losses of 77.1 billion NT next year and see its reserve fund balance sink below 1 month. The government is also considering adopting new rules about payments into the national health insurance system by citizens living abroad, which would make it harder or more expensive to opt back into the system. A pair of polls has come out giving some insights into the popularity of local politicians. Up first is an ET Today poll, which polls favorability, but also asks people to rate them on 5 different characteristics. Only 2 politicians maintained the same position on the released top 10 list since it was last taken. New Taipei Mayor Hsieh of the KMT stayed in the number 1 slot with 67.6% favorability. His predecessor, Eric Chu, or Zhu Liluan, also of the KMT, held on to the number 5 slot. There were some big moves, though, both up and down. The biggest gainer was, interestingly, Premier Su Zhentang of the DPP, who jumped 5 places to make it back into the top 10 at number 7. Usually, premiers start sliding soon after their appointments and keep on dropping. This increases the chances he won't be replaced soon, in spite of him entering the typical shelf life period of a premier's tenure soon. 2 jumped up 4 notches. Taoyuan Mayor Zheng Wencan of the DPP jumped up to number 2 on the list, and legislator Wayne Chang, or Jiang Wanan of the KMT, jumped up to take the number 3 slot. Wayne Chang was the only lawmaker to make the list, and is clearly now a politician to watch. He's widely tipped to be the KMT's candidate to run for Taipei mayor in 2022, and right now he's looking strong. 2 politicians took big hits, dropping by 5 positions. Health Minister Chen Shizhong of the DPP dropped to number 8, and Kaohsiung Mayor Chen Qimai, also of the DPP, dropped to claim the 9th spot. Health Minister Chen is potentially being eyed as a candidate for Taipei mayor or new Taipei mayor, but frankly, he's not looking like he has much of a shot at this point. Interestingly, current Taipei Mayor Ke Wen-je of the Taiwan People's Party, who had been dropping in the polls for some time, actually improved 2 rankings this time to come in at number 6. It is also interesting that Vice President William Lai, or Lai Ching-te, dropped 2 spots, now coming in at number 4. Of the top 10, 6 were from the DPP, 3 from the KMT, and 1 from the TPP. But the KMT did take 3 of the top 5 slots. Bizarrely, the 10th place finisher, Transportation Minister Lin Jialong, was mislabeled by ET Today as being KMT, which he most emphatically is not. The rankings for the 5 characteristics also produced some interesting results. Ho was top in 2, personal charisma and leadership ability, and tied with Wayne Chang on personal morality. Ho did fairly well in international vision and financial professionalism, but didn't lead the pack. Eric Chu and Chen Shizhong tied for the top slot on international vision, but Chu led the pack in financial professionalism. Overall, by the way, that Chu led the pack in financial professionalism is kind of ironic considering, well, I won't get into the KMT's financial issues, but all right. Overall, the KMT politicians did well across the board. Lin Jialong came in last, or tied for last, in all 5 categories. Many think Lin will make a run for Taichung mayor in 2022 to win back the post he lost in 2018 to Lu Xiaoyan, who didn't make the list. But I'd be very curious to see where she was ranked. They don't list anyone out of the top 10, which is a shame. What's also interesting is who wasn't on the list of the top 10, besides Lu. KMT Chair Johnny Chang, Enoch Wu, Tainan Mayor Huang Weizhe, and most interestingly, former Kaohsiung Mayor and KMT presidential candidate Daniel Han Kuo-yu all didn't make the top 10. Eric Chu looks to be sitting pretty for a run at KMT chair next August, unless Hsieh, who hasn't shown any interest so far, throws his hat into the ring. In another, somewhat oddly worded poll on the Big 6 mayors, asking who do you appreciate or admire, the word can go either way, unsurprisingly, Hsieh took the top spot with 35%. Also, unsurprisingly, Taiyuan's Zheng was second with 19.9%. Taipei's Ke came in third with 16.8%, Kaohsiung's Chen fourth at 9.6%, and Taichung's Liu fifth at 8.1%. Tainan's Huang did terribly, coming in last with only 2%. The government is considering plans to build 3 reservoirs around Taiwan to address the problem of water shortages, which are expected to become more severe in the coming years. The planned facilities are Shuangxi Reservoir in New Taipei, Tianhuahu Reservoir in Miaoli, and Nanhua Second Reservoir in Tainan. Just recently, the government decided to suspend farm irrigation in the Jianan Plain in southern Taiwan in spring of 2021, and in December will decide whether to expand that to other areas. 2 huge consumers of water, science-based parks and industrial zones, aim to curtail their water consumption by 7% at the request of the government. In spite of ample rainfall in Taiwan, though this year the complete lack of typhoons was a problem, Taiwan frequently has water shortages. Silting, leaky pipes, and water theft play a role. And also, having some of the lowest water prices in the world means there isn't much incentive to cut water wastage. Taiwan also has small reservoirs because it's a small place. Taiwan's representative to Japan, Frank Hsieh, or Hsieh Zhangting, commented on Facebook that Taiwan should prohibit imports of Japanese food products contaminated with radiation, but allow imports of food free of radiation. Perhaps he's underestimating the market for food products containing radiation. Taiwan has a ban on food imports from 5 Japanese prefectures hit by the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster due to concerns over the threat posed to food safety by possible nuclear radiation contamination. Other countries have since lifted their bans, and the issue is considered a block on getting Japanese support for joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Pact. The government is taking some steps to increase conscription and strengthen the reserves. The Ministry of National Defense has provided advance notice of changes to body composition standards for conscripts. Previously, those with a BMI over 31.5 were exempt. Now, only those with a BMI of over 35 are exempt. Now, I remember years ago when conscription was 2 years, in the bar where my girlfriend worked at the time, worked 2 guys who managed to get out of military service, one by dieting to be too skinny, and the other eating so much he was too fat. The minimum height requirement has also been lowered from 157 centimeters to 155, and some changes to the eyesight requirements have also been made. The military expects this will add 7,000 people to its ranks annually. Military conscription in Taiwan is considered by many to be nearly useless. And a recent poll showed that with conscripts only needing to undergo 4 months of Army training nowadays, respondents were asked if they felt this period of military service was too long, just right, or too short. In response, 75% said it was too short, and only 2% thought it was too long. In short, the government would have strong backing for turning back into a longer, more rigorous, and useful defense training, so they will be useful reservists after leaving their service. Now, speaking of the chief of the Defense Ministry's All-Out Defense Mobilization Office said the nation's armed forces will launch a full-scale reform of its reserve forces starting in 2022, and a trip to Israel will be part of its preparations. A 3-man delegation will visit Israel sometime between July and September of 2021 and will focus on the Israeli reservists' call-up system, training programs, and compensation. They said Israel was chosen because its conscription is similar to Taiwan's, and all Israeli citizens are subject to conscription regardless of gender, which, by the way, would be a good idea to implement here. All other measures already planned for include increasing the frequency and duration of each call-up, as well as providing better equipment and scaling up the training for reservists. A Taiwan Relations Reinforcement Act of 2020 has been put forth in the U.S. Senate. which, while it might not be passed in this session as they are running out of time, it has a good chance of going forward in the next session. It has a fair number of interesting provisions, but the one that has attracted the most attention is to change the status of the American Institute in Taiwan director, the de facto ambassador to Taiwan. If this goes into law, the Taipei AIT director would instead be titled representative, and the appointment would be made nominated by the president and would need to be approved in the Senate, which is the same process a full ambassador goes through. I'm mulling emailing the bill's authors, Senators Rubio and or Merkley, to suggest the title be ambassador at large, which is a full ambassador position, but usually assigned to a topic or a region. The topic could be called something like Taiwan Affairs. The bill also calls for a free trade pact and a range of other measures, though they wouldn't be legally binding on the executive branch, their sense of Congress provisions. In the legally binding sections, though, at least as I understand it, it would call on the government to actively include Taiwan in military exercises and would insist on regular reports to Congress on progress in getting Taiwan into international and regional organizations. Another legally binding section that seemed to be largely overlooked in the press but could be very significant is this passage these passages from the bill. Interagency Taiwan Policy Task Force. Not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this act, the president shall create an interagency Taiwan Policy Task Force consisting of senior officials from the Office of the President, the National Security Council, the Department of State, the Department of Defense, the Department of the Treasury, the Department of Commerce, and the Office of the United States Trade Representative. Report. The Interagency Taiwan Policy Task Force, established under subsection B, shall submit an annual unclassified report with a classified annex to the appropriate congressional committees, outlining policy and actions to be taken to create and execute a plan for enhancing our partnership and relations with Taiwan. In other words, all those departments would be on the hook for coming up with a plan and executing it for enhancing Taiwan-U.S. relations. So it would be people's jobs to do that. So that's why I thought that was particularly important. Now, there are calls for more exchanges on many levels, including exchanges of high-ranking officials, as well as for standing up to China's bullying of U.S. corporations to censor themselves or change their websites to downgrade Taiwan. If the bill does become law, I'll go into it in more depth, but overall, it's a very positive bill. In other positive news, Taiwan and the United States launched an initiative to expand cooperation in the area of language education and to safeguard academic freedom. Brent Christensen, director of AIT, said, specifically, the initiative will highlight and enhance Taiwan's role in providing Chinese language instruction to Americans and to people around the world. He added that the U.S. Taiwan Education Initiative, as it is called, is set against the backdrop of two distinct trends: the closing of Confucius Institutes by many universities around the world, and President Hsieh's goal to make Taiwan fully bilingual by 2030. And you'll find out in a show to be recorded this weekend that name, fully bilingual by 2030, is not a good one. However, Confucius Institutes are Beijing-supported Chinese language and cultural learning centers, which promote China's censorship and influence campaigns. In short, the U.S. and Taiwan are teaming up to provide an alternative. All right, that's it for our show today. Be sure to hit like and subscribe and all those good things. And if you can, please support us as a patron on Patreon. It really does help this project continue to go on.
This has been brought to you by the Taiwan Report. For more content like this, become our patron at report.tw.
哎呦，就是那个台湾狗啦，最喜欢我的台湾狗了。